In this section, we're going to focus on the user interface. We're going to see how to create a layout activity and handle a button click. We'll have this first video where we cover creating a layout with inputs for a shortcut key, description, and photo. This will be the primary screen that the user interacts with when the user is adding a shortcut to our collection. Next, we're going to create an activity and associate it with a layout. Next, we'll see how we can access form widgets using Butterknife and BindView. Then we'll capture data from the layout and the button click handler. Finally, we'll save all this data into a data transfer object, or in other words, a Java representation of a noun. Let's get started with our first video, where we create a layout with inputs for shortcut key, description, and photo. We're going to take a look at storyboarding. We'll consider what a flexible layout is. We'll talk about the content versus the activity layout and how this relates to material design. We'll discuss the hint attribute, and then we'll take a look at some buttons. So let's jump right in with a live example. Anytime you're designing a user interface, it's always a good idea to start with the storyboard. There are some commercial tools available. FluidUI.com is one that I've used in the past. What's nice about that is that it lets you see the entire flow through the application. That's especially important in mobile development because if you step back and look at the flow through an application, you might find out that you have too many screens. And too many screens means too many clicks for your user. So that's something where we want to see where we can consolidate screens. Example, instead of having a separate search screen and a separate results screen, just put the search on top of the results screen and make it all one screen. So in our app, it's going to be a very simple app with just a few screens. So I've just highlighted and taken Visio and essentially put together a rough look and feel of what our screen will look like. We'll have the action bar, menu bar at the top. Then we'll have a place to enter your shortcut name. And then a place where we can add a key. So a key on the keyboard, something like that. And then a plus. And then a place where we will accumulate all of the keys down here. So probably I should change this to something like Alt, Shift, something like that. So you can see all the keys that have been added. Next, we'll have a place where you can take a picture of the shortcut. And I hate to take a picture of a computer monitor, but nonetheless it will go far in demonstrating this concept. Now, a good reason why we want to storyboard is we do not want to complicate the user's view. That's an Android design principle. We should go with the simple view when it's easy to learn and understand. Minimize text. Minimize any kind of widget like buttons or text views or anything like that. Basically, we want to show only what the user needs at this point. We don't want to overwhelm the user. As a matter of fact, we want to think about where we don't need buttons, but that's a whole other topic. We could think about things like broadcast receivers to replace buttons. We could think about this right here. I'm using a camera as a stand-in for an image that the camera will take. Now, I could have a button down here that says take photo, or I could just have this image view be tappable, and anytime you tap it, it toggles the camera and takes a new picture. So a few ways that we can go about eliminating or reducing the number of buttons and the number of widgets on our screen. One other thing to point out, there's a traditional widget that you don't see on this screen. Let me point out what we have here. We have an editable text field here where we can give the shortcut a name. This is an autocomplete field here where we can start typing a key. And then this is essentially an accumulation of all the keys that we've typed up here. This one's not editable. Now, what's the missing widget? You don't see a separate label. In the old days, it was typical to put a label to the left of an editable text field or maybe on top, but that's one more widget, that's one more piece of clutter on our app. Notice that what we've done here is we have embedded the label inside of the editable text field, which is something very doable with Android. So let's take this mock-up and make a screen out of it. If we take a look at our Android application so far, we can navigate from source to main, and then from main we'll navigate to res, which is our resource folder, and from resource to layout. Now you see two different XML files here that look kind of similar. As a matter of fact, I'll click on design so we can look at it in the WYSIWYG editor. So we have content and we have activity. And if you look at them like so, they both look the same. What's the difference? Well, the difference is what we call material design. because activity is essentially a layer that sits on top of the content. Activity has things like the floating action button, which means it belongs to the activity layout, not to the content layout. So we can design the content layout all we want, and we don't have to worry about this floating action button because it lives in a different layout. Now, you're probably wondering which one you want to edit. Most of the time you want to edit this one called content. Now, one trick here is there are a lot of windows that are trying to get our attention, so we'll hit this little collapse icon, and that will allow us to focus on our keyboard shortcut. In its current state, it leaves a bit to be desired because it's supposed to be a WYSIWYG editor, but if we drag and drop something on there, it doesn't show up. And the weird thing is it says Android ... coordinator layout, which doesn't tell us much. Note the purple exclamation here. That will tell us, in this case, that there's a render problem. Failed to find style, coordinator, layout style, and current theme. That's a bit annoying because your thought is, wait, I didn't do anything wrong. Why is it telling me this? To fix that, what we want to do is we want to go to this styles. And inside of the style, we need to add a theme. So a little bit of copy and paste magic here. And here we go, item name, coordinator, layout style, and then style, widget support, coordinator, layout, so on and so forth. Now, one more to add, and for this I'm going to go to high def mode. Floating action button. Now, one note here, these are a couple of things that I've added, and you might not need to add them. Because we are running on Android P, which is a very new version of Android, the support libraries are changing. They're in beta releases and alpha releases and the like. So I had to do a couple things here to get the layout to show. You might not need to do this. If your layout shows, you're in good shape and you don't need to take these steps. One side note while we're here, notice that this file called styles.xml defines 3 colors that are used throughout our app. They're kind of the theme colors for our app. So you see color primary, color dark, color accent, and you see the colors are shown here on the left. If you navigate to a file called colors, which is in the same directory, that's where these colors are defined. So if you want to change color to something else, this is where you want to go to do that. Nonetheless, let's run back and take a look at our user interface, and you see now it makes a little bit more sense because you can see it kind of puts this Hello World widget on there. And once again, just confirming I'm in the content shortcut, not the activity shortcut. They both look the same. Activity shortcut, what it owns is this button right here, and you can see it's called out right here. That's the floating action button. And if we go to content shortcut, this is the content file, which is essentially all of the widgets we want to add to our screen. Let's go ahead and take off this one, Hello World, which was added for us. That's going to be clutter, so we might as well remove it. So remember here, what we want to add is an editable text field for shortcut name, and then a key, a button, and then a read-only label, and then an image view. Not a whole lot, really, that we have to add. So I'm going to go up to text, and I'm going to go to plain text, and just drop this guy wherever. And you see as soon as I drop him, I can click on these kind of circles, and I can say, okay, I want to tie you to these locations. I want to tie you to the very top, and left and right. Layout width, let's change it to match constraint. And note what that's going to do is that essentially fills the entire area with this widget, which is oftentimes a good idea. You don't know how wide the user screen is going to be. So if you just fill width, many times it can look good on many different devices. Now, if we look at what it currently says, you see it has the word name in there. But that name is in text. We want to remove that. Notice when we remove it, we'll give it just a moment here, it goes away, as you might suspect. But remember we said we were going to consolidate our labels with our widgets. Well, we do that, but not with text. We do it with hint. So for hint, I say shortcut name, just like so. What's the difference? Notice the hint comes up in a lighter shade of gray, essentially. And also, when this is running, when you click in there, the hint will go away. Where with text, if you click in that box or if you give it focus, the text remains. Okay, so there's our shortcut name. Now we wanted an autocomplete text view for the keys, so we'll go ahead and drop this here. Let's anchor this to the bottom of shortcut name, and let's also anchor it to the left. And we know we need to remove the text because autocomplete text view doesn't really tell us much. And let's just say completion hint will say, well, Actually, for this one, I'm tempted to go ahead and do a completion hint here. We'll say keys, just like so. And okay, and one more moment. And what we need to do is we need to add a button on the same, essentially, row. So I'm going to take this button, and I'm going to tie him to the same height, essentially. And we'll bring him over to the left, like so. And now let's take our autocomplete, and let's marry these two together. And let's also change the autocomplete to match constraint. And just a moment, we'll try that one more time. And now you see that what we have is we do have the shortcut name that takes up the entire length up here, and then the autocomplete text view, and we have our button right here. Let's change the button label. I'm going to do this a little bit better with an image in a moment, but let's just change it to a plus, which indicates, add this key. Now, also the completion hint doesn't show up here in this autocomplete. So what I'm going to do, I don't see the hint property here. So what I'm going to do is hit View All Attributes, and then I'm going to scroll up, and sure enough, the word hint, and we'll say keys here, and we see that that appears right down there. So these are both editable. Now what's going to fall under this is essentially a label, a read-only label. And in that case, we don't want it to look editable. That's considered bad usability. If we take an editable field and disable it, then the user always thinks, hey, how can I turn this on so I can edit it? So if there's a field that the user can never edit, don't be tempted to make it a text box and disable it. Instead, just make it a label. So a label in the language of Android is a text view. So I'm going to drop this guy, and once again, we can use our constraint magic to put him below the autocomplete for keys. Let's go ahead and make this one left and right, and then I'm going to go to fewer attributes so it can be a little easier to focus. And let's say match constraint, so that takes up the entire width. And now we want to get rid of that ugly text called text view. So what we can do is we can just say, you know what, let's just remove it altogether. That way it will just start populating it as soon as the user adds something to it. Okay, one more thing that we want to add, and that is an image view, which is going to show an image from the camera. Also, we'll have the ability to tap on the image and take a new picture. So I grab the image view, drop, and I bet you can see what's going to happen here. First of all, I just need to give it, sure, let's give it something simple. And okay, we can find our own image of choice in a moment. Let's drag the constraint below the label here and to the left. And we might need to do a little bit of resizing to get this guy just as we need to go. Or when all else fails, let's see, we'll try, there we go, a little resizing like that. When all else fails, we can always go to the XML under the covers and we can edit that. But nonetheless, it looks like I'm just about where I want to be. Let's go ahead and change the width to match constraint, like so, and change the height also to match constraint. Whoop, almost where I want to be. We need to drag the constraint down. Okay, so take a look. We have shortcut name, we have keys, we have the plus button, we have the label where our shortcut is going to go, and then optionally we have a picture that the user can take of the shortcut, and we have our menu bar. How does that look compared to the quick and dirty storyboard I put together earlier? Pretty darn close, and the nice thing is, because this is a constraint layout, it's fluid, so it is adaptable to multiple resolutions, which is something we need to consider in Android programming, especially given the number of devices that are out there.